Let's bring in Jenny Horne. Let's talk some more about the earnings driving the overnight and morning action. Back to Crowdstrike. This is such a good report that Palo Alto rallied back last night, Jenny. Why are people loving it so much?
Well, I think that's the importance of like these names that have been seen as the barometer of cybersecurity. Like Okta was one. We were looking at example trades yesterday, and we were like, well, hey, there's Crowdstrike earnings, so you have to be mindful of that. These names have traded in tandem, and Kevin mentioned the fact that we did see some of this pressure really following Palo Alto Network's disappointing results that CrowdStrike was also then victim of, but they fell about 5% just yesterday, then rose as much as 21% after hours after a blowout quarter. I mean, beating expectations as far as their top and bottom line went, while also seeing over 36% revenue growth on GAAP earnings, or non-GAAP earnings, excuse me, that also rose about 30%. They did also announce they'd be acquiring Flow Security for an undisclosed price in a cash and stock deal that's slated to close in their fiscal first quarter. And they said they've been stepping up their merger and acquisition activity, though, in recent months, and have really been focused on not only stopping these breaches, but also being their customers' consolidator of choice, as well as the go-to platform overall. They guided for first quarter revenue well past expectations at around 902 to 906 million, also expecting earnings per share to be better than had been expected. And they reiterated their focus on this $10 billion in annual recurring revenue by 2030. Compare that to the around $3.5 billion they saw in recurring revenue in January. So they see growth. I mean, subscription revenue was up 33%. Overall, free cash flow improved this quarter. I mean, like Oliver, as far as an earnings beat goes, there is very little to be disappointed about here. Even their subscription growth margins were an improvement. So everything about this company looks more healthy than it did, say, like a year ago. And I think this just goes to show there's clear winners and losers in the cybersecurity space. It's not like a sort of rising, tide lifts all boats. It hasn't been that case at all. And CrowdStrike looking like a winner of this earnings season.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one to see how the market's processing it. Very broadly positive for the whole group. Obviously, they're not rallying like CrowdStrike is this morning, but still general strength when it seems like we've learned this earnings season, to your point. There are some very different levels of quality here. Stickiness of customer, margin management at these companies that goes from stock to stock. So we'll see if Palo Alto and the other ones can hold their bid. Maybe because the market got dinged yesterday, everything's just bouncing back. But it was interesting to see last night the way it was immediate rally in some of the peers, because, I mean, these are definitely standout earnings. And that was kind of the whole point of this earnings season, is to see levels of quality be rewarded.
I mean, I think last week, like in a sea of red, Okta closed up 31%.
Yeah, so another good example.
Another really great example of one that didn't matter what anyone else reported even last week. They held on to that nice gain. Now, with CrowdStrike specifically, they operate in cloud cybersecurity. They're seen as the leaders specifically in that niche, but they all operate somewhat in different ways. That could also play into it. But hey, you can't have breaches like Okta had, which I guess didn't even matter. Zscaler has cache issues. So they do all have their own set of basically constraints and then also strengths. But CrowdStrike is still, I mean, it more than doubled last year.
True. Okay. All right. Well, it's back. Seems like they beat about every metric they could. Thanks, Jenny. All right. Important mover this morning. Keeping the tech bait going after a little rough spot yesterday.